Growing up, my family lived in a secluded house at the edge of a forest. It was peaceful but isolated, especially at night. One summer, my parents went on a weekend trip, leaving me alone in the house for the first time. I was 16 and excited about the freedom, but also a bit nervous. The first night was uneventful. I watched some TV, played video games, and went to bed early. The second night, however, was different. Around midnight, I heard a faint knock at the front door. At first, I thought it was the wind or my imagination. But the knock came again, louder this time. I tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole. There was no one there. I felt a chill run down my spine. I decided not to open the door and went back to the living room, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Suddenly, the knocking started again, but this time it was coming from the back door. I grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly approached the door. I could see a shadow moving on the other side. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to stay calm. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound brave. There was no response, only silence. I stood there, knife in hand, not knowing what to do. Then, the knocking stopped, and I heard footsteps walking away. I quickly locked all the doors and windows, feeling a sense of dread. I went to my bedroom, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening for any sound. Hours passed, and just when I started to relax, I heard a creaking noise coming from the basement. Gathering all my courage, I decided to investigate. I took my phone and the knife and slowly made my way to the basement door. The creaking continued, getting louder as I got closer. I opened the door and shined my phone's flashlight down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. I froze, unable to move or speak. The figure slowly turned its head and looked up at me. I could see a pair of glowing eyes staring back. I slammed the door shut and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I called my parents and told them everything. They called the police, who arrived within minutes. The officers searched the house but found no one. They said it was probably just my imagination, but I knew what I saw. I never stayed alone in that house again. To this day, I can still remember those glowing eyes in the dark basement, watching me. Growing up in rural Ohio, our house sat on a sprawling 5-acre property surrounded by dense woods. It was peaceful but isolated, with the nearest neighbor a mile away. I was 14 when this happened, and my parents often left me alone, trusting me to manage the house and the property. I was a responsible kid, mature for my age, and I didn't mind the solitude. One crisp autumn evening, my parents had to attend an event in town, leaving me home alone. I decided to spend the evening playing Resident Evil 4 on my GameCube in the living room. It was getting late, and the sounds of the game mingled with the natural creaks and groans of the house. Suddenly, I heard a sharp, metallic clang from outside. My heart jumped. I paused the game and listened. The sound came again, this time louder and more pronounced. I grabbed the flashlight and cautiously looked out the windows, trying to see into the dark yard. The storage shed in the back had its door wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. I grabbed the shotgun my dad kept in the closet and headed outside, yelling, "Who's there?" My voice echoed through the night, but there was no response. I approached the shed slowly, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Inside, the clutter of tools and equipment created a maze of hiding spots. I scanned the area, my pulse racing, but found nothing. I locked the shed door and hurried back to the house, double-checking all the locks once inside. I settled back into my game, trying to shake off the unease. Then, I heard faint creaks from upstairs. I turned the volume down and listened intently. The creaks grew louder, moving steadily across the ceiling. Someone was up there. Gripping the shotgun tightly, I made my way upstairs, stepping as quietly as possible. The upstairs hallway was dark, with 4 closed doors. I started with my parents' bedroom, which was the closest. I dropped to my knees and peeked under the door. My heart nearly stopped when I saw a pair of dirty, bare feet. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to stay calm. I backed away and retreated to the downstairs bathroom, locking the door behind me. I called my dad's cell phone, but he didn't answer. I left a frantic voicemail, then dialed 911. Whispering, I explained the situation to the operator. She assured me that help was on the way and told me to stay quiet. The footsteps upstairs grew louder, moving towards the stairs. My heart pounded as they descended slowly, then stopped right outside the bathroom door. A moment of silence, then a deep, gravelly voice said, "I know you're in there." I was paralyzed with fear. The operator kept asking if I was okay. I shouted, "I'm on the phone with the police and I have a gun." The man tried the doorknob, but it was locked. I heard his footsteps retreat and the back door slammed shut. Minutes later, the police arrived. They searched the house and surrounding area but found no one. The intruder had vanished into the night. My parents returned home, horrified by what had happened. We stayed with a neighbor that night, too shaken to remain in the house. The police never caught the intruder, and the memory of that night still haunts me. Every creak and whisper in the dark brings back the fear of those moments, reminding me how close I came to a true nightmare. When I was around 12 years old, I lived in a small town with my mom and younger sister. Our house was on the edge of town, next to a dense forest. We loved the peace and quiet, but it also meant that it could get pretty lonely and eerie at night. One weekend, my mom had to go on a business trip and left me in charge. She trusted me because I was responsible and knew how to take care of my sister. It was a typical Saturday evening. My sister and I had just finished watching a movie and she had gone to bed. I stayed up a little longer to read a book. It was around midnight when I heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy across the ground. I brushed it off, thinking it was just an animal or my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again. This time it was louder and closer. I decided to take a look, so I grabbed a flashlight and went to the living room window. I shined the light outside but couldn't see anything unusual. The noise had stopped, so I figured it was nothing and went back to my book. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard a loud thud on our front porch. My heart started pounding. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I tiptoed to the front door and peered through the peephole. At first, I couldn't see anything. But then I noticed a shadow moving on the other side of the door. I froze, not knowing what to do. I didn't want to wake my sister and scare her, but I also didn't want to open the door. I decided to call my mom, hoping she could tell me what to do. She didn't answer, so I left a voicemail, trying to stay as calm as possible. I went back to the living room, keeping the front door in my line of sight. I kept the flashlight off to avoid drawing attention. Then, I heard the doorknob turn. Someone was trying to get in. I felt a chill run down my spine. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, which happened to be a heavy book, and stood ready. The doorknob stopped turning, and for a moment, everything was quiet again. I started to think that maybe they had given up. But then, I heard a tapping on the window. I turned slowly, my flashlight now pointing towards the sound. A face was pressed against the glass, staring right at me. It was an older man with wild hair and a crazed look in his eyes. I screamed and dropped the flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. The tapping turned into banging as the man started hitting the window harder. I ran to my sister's room and locked the door behind me. I woke her up and told her to stay quiet. We hid in the closet, clutching each other, terrified. I called 911 and whispered what was happening. The operator assured me that help was on the way and told me to stay hidden. We could hear the man moving around outside, trying to find another way in. It felt like an eternity, but finally we saw the red and blue lights flashing outside. The police had arrived. There were shouts and a struggle, then silence. A police officer knocked on our door and called out, saying it was safe to come out. I opened the door cautiously and saw 2 officers standing there. They told us that they had caught the man. He was a drifter who had been seen around town acting strangely. We were safe now. My mom came home the next day, and I told her everything. She hugged us tightly, apologizing for not being there. That night we all slept in the same room, still shaken from the experience. Even now, years later, I sometimes think about that night and what could have happened. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, and I always make sure to double check that all the doors and windows are locked before going to bed.